Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very impactful show coming right up with special guest Dyer, and he's here today to share with us his new book, The Power of Company Culture: How Any Business Can Build a Culture That Improves Productivity, Performance, and Profits. Now, Chris is a recognized performance expert who's constantly intrigued by what makes some businesses and individuals more successful than others. He has dedicated years of research to uncovering what drives productivity and profits. As a speaker and consultant, Chris works with leading organizations to help them transform their cultures to boost performance and gain even a greater edge in the marketplace. So let's welcome to the show, Dyer.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Oh, what a pleasure it is to have you here. What a powerful book. My goodness, I feel like every company in the U.S. should have this in their hands.
Well, I agree with you. That'd be great for me. And I think it'd be great for their organizations as well, all kidding aside.
Yeah, and the people that it serves. And so, I have to ask you, what inspired you to write this book?
It's a long story. I'll try to give you the short version, which is, back in the recession in 2009, things were, going pretty bad for everybody. And I had a little bit of extra time on my hands to think about, what I was going to do and how the company was going to survive, if it was going to survive, and what changes might really be necessary for us to be a better organization going forward. And I looked at that recession, although a negative experience, that we could ultimately do something positive with that time, right? That couldn't change what the economy was doing, but we could change how we interacted with it. So we really went back to reinvent the company to make ourselves stronger so that when the markets did get better, we were even more competitive and even in a better place than we were when we started. And that led me to really do a lot of research about how to run my company better, the types of company structures that might be best. And what I found is that, my own leadership and management philosophies were a bit outdated. It was that kind of old school management stuff. It was really a lot of sports coaching ideology, and which was okay when you're smaller, but it really doesn't work. You can't make people do push-ups or run around the block if they don't do what you ask them to do. That doesn't work like it does with kids. So really changing that aspect. And then we also figured out that, going virtual, becoming a remote organization was going to be the best way for us to stay relevant and to pay the bills and keep the lights on. And so that kind of started this fascination of mine with learning about what makes a great company culture. What is the best things we could be doing as a company to be competitive and to really make sure our employees love their work and that we love working with them. And that led to me speaking about it, which led to me having a radio show about it, which then someone came knocking on my door and said, "Hey, do you want to write a book?" And I went, "Are you talking to the right person? Did you mean this, Dyer?" I just didn't ever expect it to happen, but that's how we got here today.
And it's interesting how our journeys were, a lot of times, it's happened in my career, we just end up in places that we, didn't expect to. And it ends up being such a huge transformation along the way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm a big listener to your, on your show. You have Talent Talk, which is a fabulous show, and then love the guests that you have and the discussions that are being had there. So you talk about, and we're not going to cover everything because, of course, we want people to pick up their own copy of The Power of Company Culture, but we do want to just kind of talk a little bit in regards to the foundation. What makes a stellar company culture? What should companies really be striving to have as far as developing a company culture?
Well, so I start the book off. The book is in three parts. What should you be doing to at least be good, right? What's the minimum your company should be doing so that your workplace doesn't suck? And that really is a lot of work in itself. There are certainly things that need to be done that a lot of companies aren't doing, haven't even thought about. The second part is, what are the greatest companies in the world doing? What is the greatest cultures that have been studied and time tested and, are are worshipped and talked about and all that? What are the things that they seem to be doing? And that's the second part. Like it's my 7 pillars of a great company culture. And then the third part was really important to me because I've read a lot of books. And in a lot of books, they tell you what the problem is, and they don't always tell you how to fix it. And so even though the actual answer for every company might be slightly different, the third part is really how to engage and how to make it happen in your organization and deal with things like cognitive biases and communication. And regardless of what you decide to change in your company, if you're going to say, hey, we're going to go from here to there, there's all these roadblocks in the way. There's people worried about their jobs and fear and, people don't want to change and all of that. So how do you deal with that stuff? And that's really how the book is broken up.
Mm-hmm. Well, and so what are some of the signs of a really poor company culture then? So if people are looking at their, at their company going, gosh, we need to make changes, but we're not even sure where we fall on that scale as poor, medium, good. We're not even sure where we're at on that.
Yeah, I would say some warning signs are going to be that senior management are clearly saying one thing, right? They're preaching one thing, and yet they consistently do something very different. Mm-hmm. That is probably one of the largest complaints that I hear from people when I go and speak at conferences. They say, my CEO says we do all these things, and yet every single time there's an opportunity for he or she to really show those values and make good choices. That way they clearly go another way. The second is working for someone who's a difficult personality. You can have these tyrants and egomaniacs. And, if your leader is someone that you just don't respect and you don't value, you really can't ever expect your culture to get to where it needs to be. But those are big things. There's also some little things in there as well, like, does your company micromanage you to the point of exactly what you're supposed to wear? And, I've seen companies where the number one complaint was they have designated lunch times. We're talking about a company that's maybe got, 50 customer service people in an office, and they're telling them down to the minute exactly when they have to go, take their lunch and things like that. But, somehow we as human beings can't figure out as a group, when's the right time to go and when's not, and make sure we have coverage and things like that. So I think General Motors, it's got, their policy on dress code is, I think it's dress professionally. It's 2 words, right? That's their whole dress code. And, that takes care of it. And I think that's a sign of a really good culture. I've also been and gone and done consulting gigs and had seen dress codes that were over, 15 pages long inside of an employee handbook. And you could say, well, that's important. Dress code might be important, things like that. But I see it as a larger issue that instead of having real conversations with employees and instead of maybe helping them figure out how to make choices and how to make good decisions inside of their work life every day, we instead want to make these tiny little rules to micromanage them and to make sure that they don't, they don't violate some little rule and it's annoying to some managers. So I think it's really a sign of whether or not the company is really involving employees and having a real conversation and expecting them to be adults, or are we going to treat them like, teenagers or children?
Yeah. And it really is, it seems a big respect thing and also allowing people room to grow. And I've worked in business to business. I was working in insurance where we did business to business consulting, and it was really interesting. I can remember one company, actually, I haven't thought about them in a long time, where if they were a minute late, it was a reprimand. And if they got that 3 times from coming back from lunch, they were automatically fired. And you'd have these long lines of people all trying to clock in, on correct time, and there's one clock to do it. So of course you're going to have people late,
Right.
It just don't make sense. You look at it going, how can that be an empowering environment if people are stressed out about losing their job for being a minute late?
Yeah, and you really kind of point to the problem, right, where some leader, somebody said, this is the policy, right, and I expect these people to get here back on time, and yet didn't have the conversation to say, if that really is the right thing to do, and I would have some argument with that, but let's just say that was the right thing to do, that they should be back on time, and you're going to enforce that kind of policy. To your point, you better have 10 clocks, right? You better have the ability for people to come back and clock in and not have a barrier in a way that's not their fault, right? Or allowing people to schedule when they go. Maybe some people go to lunch at 11, and some people go to lunch at 12, and others go to lunch at 12:30 or 1. So you don't have everyone showing up at the same time, right? So these are the kinds of things where if you have a conversation, usually some pretty common sense things happen. And if you don't, just somebody makes this, demand on everybody and doesn't think it through, it really is a sign of larger issues that you should be afraid of.
And that's when they need your help, right? Get in there and kind of shake things up.
Exactly.
Well, in your book, and getting back to the power of company culture, you talk about transparency. So why is that so important?
Yeah, this is one of the ones that I think companies do a pretty bad job at, but it's also the one that they can start doing a really good job at really quickly and see a really big change. So, the bad news is they tend to not be doing it so well. The good news is it doesn't take much to really start to change some of this. So they really, as companies, look at transparency. There are lots of different ways to think about it. Now, you can go to the full extreme, and I can give you some examples of companies that have taken transparency to the, oh my gosh, I can't believe they're able to do that, to just some basic common sense things. So let's start with the common sense, which is, do we share? Does everyone know what everyone else's goals are? Do departments know what each department's goals are? Right? Do senior leaders know each other's goals? Because very often I go into the companies and find out that senior leaders' goals are not only completely different, but they're contradicting with each other. So you have leaders inside the organizations which are already set up to start fighting for resources and fighting with each other because their goals are not aligned. So things like just starting with that. Can you have people share what they do? Can you have people go and cross, observe someone for a few hours? If you take a customer service person and have them go observe, what people do in accounting, or what, someone in sales, what they might do in tech support. That kind of understanding, that kind of, a day in the life of understanding other people's experiences and what they do and the work that they do can just be such a huge benefit to everyone inside the organization to have that clarity and transparency. Now, the extremes of that are sharing financial data. So we share our P&L. We're very open and honest about our sales goals and how we're doing as a company, and we think that's super important. Not everyone is comfortable doing that, and I say, you got to decide how comfortable you are, and that might mean maybe you share some of that financial data, or you share maybe your sales data, or whatever it may be. But when I started really sharing that our finances, I was a bit apprehensive about it, thinking, okay, with all these negative things that could end up doing. And, instead, I had people coming to me with these fantastic ideas on how we could save money, things I had never thought of, because now I was sharing all this information. And people said, geez, I didn't realize we spent this much money on this thing. I know someone, or I have a better idea, and we can save money here. Just the other day, one of my research team people said, hey, I found a new way to do something. It's going to save the company $17,000 a year. And I stared at the screen for like 5 minutes and said, I was absolutely in awe. And I went, I can't believe what an idiot I have been all those years not sharing that information, because that would have never happened if they hadn't known that. And they did it on their own, and everyone said, great job and congratulated that person, and we gave them all kinds of accolades. But that would have never happened if I had kept all that data to myself,
Well, that, and also, and you talk about this in your book as well, you listen to the person that was giving the information. You're having this openness where you can have this dialogue and this conversation where that's not really available in a lot of companies.
Correct. And, that's a really good point. A lot of companies just aren't having these conversations and listening to people. And there's lots of great ways to do that. I mean, so listening is a whole other pillar. And We can listen to our employees, listen to our customers, listen to our vendors. There's all sorts of people inside of that tree there that we can listen to. But, you have to actively go out there and ask questions, and you have to also do things to make sure that people understood that you heard them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's
those are two different concepts. Yeah.
And how important is that? Because I'm sure many people. I mean, I've been in, when I was younger, was in different companies where they weren't really open to ideas of maybe doing things differently because they did it a certain way, And I think people are more craving that now than ever to not only have their input heard, but being able to contribute in a way that would really benefit the company.
Right. So one way that, often companies will ask, well, how can I do this? How can I make sure that, we're, especially in this age of millennials and Gen X, we have or Gen Z coming into the workforce, we have this, group of people that are used to being able to get information quickly, to get feedback very quickly, to know whether they're right or wrong or on the right track. They're able to constantly make small incremental changes to be able to get better and do things in a more efficient way, right? I mean, just think about, if I wanted to learn guitar, I would have to schedule a lesson and go once a week to go see someone, and that would be great. That's actually how I learned guitar. And everyone else is like going on YouTube and watching a video and practicing on their own, and they can do as much or as little as they want to do. They can do that on top of a traditional teacher as well. So they have a completely different experience than other people may have had with trying to learn something new and do something new. So one of the things that we suggest that companies do is to eliminate their annual survey. I think annual surveys are dumb. I hate them. I'm not sure I can say it any stronger without using inappropriate language on your podcast. But I think that instead what people should do is a weekly survey. So take your annual survey, take your best 52 questions, and just ask those questions one at a time, once per week, and you will find that actual participation rate is huge. We average in the 90 percentiles every single week, and most of that is people gone on the road on vacation. I mean, most of the time if they miss, it's because they're not in the office, and we don't expect them to complete the survey if they're gone. So I get just about full participation of anyone who's actively, working that week. And I get great responses because they can think about just one question. They can think about it deeply, and they can give me a great answer to whatever that question is. And then I can go back and read it and interpret it and talk to my senior team, and we can make changes if necessary, or address whatever we're hearing. If there's something that does need to be addressed immediately, and within a week, we are implementing things and making changes and having conversations and working through anything that comes up with our staff within a week. But it's small little changes at a time. Instead of, typical annual survey, it might open up for a month. It might take 3 months for senior leadership to digest it. It might take another 3 months to talk to people and implement changes. The next thing you know, that person did that survey. It's been 6 months since they told you they were mad or they didn't like something, and you finally started to do something. That you've already lost them by then. And things have changed so much by then that it's already gone. So there are some really awesome ways to be able to listen to people that are free and don't take any change in your organization other than how you go about it.
Well, and in your experience, I kind of piggyback on this because when we talk about change in company culture, you bring up a point of positivity in business, and I think that it's so important. And I'd love for you to kind of share with our listeners, what do you mean by that, and how does that affect a company?
Yeah, so we noticed that the greatest organizations have a positivity, and I sort of use that word in a very general sense, but we really in the book get into this really a thought process called appreciative inquiry. So for a long time, appreciative inquiry, which is almost a sociology or psychology-based process, has been going. And at the same time, the neuroscientists have been studying the same thing in their way. And recently, in the last couple of years, they've actually come together, right? It's like your right hand and your left hand have now met and are shaking. And that's what these two different disciplines have recently done. because they have found out the same things in different ways. In studying people's behaviors, they came to the same conclusions as the neuroscientists did in studying dopamine and oxytocin, all these different things that, hormones and brain chemicals that are being released. They found the exact same result in different ways. And basically, the net is when we look at things through this lens of positivity, through this appreciative inquiry, what could things be? What is working well? Looking at organizations and saying, who my organization is doing an awesome job. Okay, why are they doing an awesome job? What is it about them and their situation? And how do I make that more applicable, or how do I make that experience happen for other employees? Instead of, who are my 5 worst employees and should I fire them? Or should we go back and get them coaches and study them and find out why they suck? And usually that doesn't get us anywhere. It's why are our best people succeeding? So it's a different lens to look at the world through. It's a different way to approach any sort of challenges we have in our organizations. It's this idea of, we've seen surveys and net promoter scores and things like that. The best organizations say we want to know if our clients are not happy. We want to know if they're not satisfied so we can make that outcome even better. And that's another kind of version of this positivity, as opposed to, hiding from that data and pretending, that everything's okay when maybe it's not.
Yeah. I love in your book you talk about, when there's that whole feedback thing, and you say about giving feed forward, and I love that.
Yeah, that is a great thing I learned. So, this is a great example of some of the things that I learned as I went out and talked to everyone I could talk to. I got to spend a morning with Marshall Goldsmith, who's a great best-selling author, and really enjoy his stuff, and got to spend some time with him. And he brought up this concept with me of, I had him on the radio show, and he talked about feed forward. And I've just taken that, and I have tried to tell everyone I could find about this concept. And that is, if you think about a meeting, let's say you have been in a meeting and Sally and Tom are in a meeting, and Sally keeps cutting Tom off. Doesn't seem to let Tom talk. Every time he opens his mouth, Sally's got a better suggestion, a better answer, whatever he says, and she just keeps jumping on top of him. And so I think what we typically do is we pull Sally in and we say, Sally, listen, what's going on? Every time Tom talks, you cut him off, you're a jerk, you're whatever words you want to use in that conversation. And Sally will get defensive, right? And maybe she's saying, well, no, I'm trying to explain, I'm trying to help him, but she's going to be defensive. And what I find with feed forward, and this is a very simple example of this, but if you go to Sally and say, Sally, listen, in the next meeting, so the going forward part, I'm not going to ask Sally to change past behaviors, because that's impossible. Unless we're going to invent a time machine, we can't change anything that's happened in the past. But I can say, Sally, going forward or in the next meeting, can you make sure that Tom has an opportunity to get his opinion out, that you give him the space to talk before, presenting your ideas? And 99.99% of the time, it's amazing. People always say yes. They always accept it with a very positive and appreciative response, that I'm asking them to look at their behaviors and look at their experience the next time it happens, giving the opportunity to choose on how they're going to react, as opposed to saying, why every time we have a meeting and Tom starts to talk, you jump all over him, you're a jerk, or whatever those things are. And I find that simple concept of asking for people to clearly define for them the behaviors you expect, and ask for them to be a part of that solution in the coming events and coming experiences and coming meetings, or whatever it may be, is so powerful, and they almost always are on board with it.
Well, and a lot of times they probably don't even realize they're doing that until it's brought up to their attention. But I love how you approach this in such a gentle way that people can really look at their behaviors and make those adjustments. And it's not necessarily saying, you're bad for doing this. It's just like, hey, let's make these adjustments and grow together. Exactly.
And if they can and they do, then fantastic. And if they can't or they won't, then you have more and more conversations, and, the positivity and all these things we're talking about doesn't mean that everyone, stays in their job forever. There are those times when you may have, if you've taken people down the right path and they haven't continued to walk down that correct path, you may have to opt out, right? They may not be the right person for the job, and that's okay. They may fit somewhere else, and they may, do better in a different position. But I think the way in which we walk them down that path, that they're more likely to walk with you and to help you and to help your organization. I've rarely ever found it to work the opposite. We're constantly being critical of people and what they've done in the past. Again, they can't change that. They can only change what they do in the future.
Yeah. Well, you worked with some really top companies, and I think a couple of these are even Fortune 500 companies or 200. During your time that you've worked with these companies in developing company culture and moving forward, have you ever come across something that has really been a challenge in moving the company forward?
Well, every organization does seem to have that thing. They have a thing when they kind of get stuck. So what I have found really interesting since releasing the book is so many people have told me that a similar story. We're really good at like 3 or 4 of these pillars, and boy, are we bad at 2 or 3 of these other ones. I mean, it seems like most organizations are not bad at everything. But they can quickly identify these are the areas that we are bad. So, in organizations that tend to be struggling, where they have high turnover, transparency seems to be a pretty big one. One of the pillars, like mistakes, I find, that is one that really, you're really getting into the am I a B plus or an A minus type company, right? Really starting to look at some things in a very granular level. Whereas, having a transparent company or being good listeners, things like that, are really areas where you can have huge change and huge improvements in your company by really bringing in some of these things. So I will say, though, that if we look at the measurement pillar, I've seen some organizations really struggle with data. And what I mean by that is that they want to measure things, but they haven't properly determined what they should be measuring and what is important for them to measure and what the outcomes, what types of data they're going to get back, what's important for them to pay attention to. And, I gave an example earlier about, is it better for us to study all of our sales team, or is it better for us to study our top performers? And I would argue it's better for us to really study and understand why our top performers are top performers, so that we can replicate that scenario, replicate those experiences and those resources and those tools and or those personality types or whatever it may be as we continue to hire more people. That is far more important than us understanding what everyone on our sales team is doing, and maybe what our low performers are doing as a measurement piece. So I see that people try to measure so many things, whether it's Salesforce or any other large software system. I mean, you can have death by, overanalyzation of things. And this is really where leadership needs to step in. And they need to be very clear about what their goals are, what they want to measure, what's important for them to understand, and what is unimportant, what is just junk that they need to clear away so they can really focus on what's important.
And I think that's so important. And I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I have seen that where it's like, you guys are really going to do an analysis on that. Well, that's interesting. When there are other things that, like you're talking about, that could really matter. And I love how you focus on the top performers, because, those type of habits are duplicatable. It's not just that they're a unicorn or a freak of nature. Those are things that usually they're teachable things that other people can learn.
Right. Absolutely.
Well, Chris, where can people connect with you and learn more about the work you're doing, your book, The Power of Company Culture, and be part of your community?
Well, yeah, thank you. So happy to connect on LinkedIn. You can also go to my website, which is Chris, the letter P, as in like my middle name, Patrick. So ChrisPDyer, DYER.com. I have all kinds of resources there and blogs, and certainly sign up for the newsletter there. We regularly send out things about every 3 or 4 weeks with great articles and things that people might be able to use in their companies all the time with these little kind of fun ideas. I also send out a quote of the day, and I have all kinds of people on that list. So if you'd like to have an inspirational quote to you sent to you just about every day, that every once in a while I forget or go on vacation, but I'm happy to have you do that. So connect with me on LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever social platform you use. I'm probably there, and happy to connect. And if I can help you further, we can keep the conversation going.
Without a doubt. And companies that are looking to get in touch with you, they can go to the same place, right?
Absolutely.
Perfect. Because there are a lot of companies that need your help, Chris. So I hope you're drinking your coffee and eating your Wheaties, because you're going to be a pretty busy guy.
Yeah. I look forward to helping them further, and it's been an absolute joy that so far the ones that I've been able to connect with so far and help. It's amazing to see the change just in a little bit of work and a little bit of an interaction, how much companies can really change for the better, and most importantly to see how much better their employees' lives are, how much better their work is, how much happier they can be, and all of that always, for anyone that is thinking about this, always seems to impact productivity, performance, and most importantly, profit.
Mm-hmm. It hits the bottom line without a doubt. It's so expensive to hire and retain and train new people. It's better to get your company culture set and right. The power of company culture is a great way to start doing that. And, of course, hire Chris to come out to your company and get things right. Chris, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Well, thank you, Chris. It has been such a pleasure to spend this time with you and, of course, to talk about your new book, The Power of Company Culture, How Any Business Can Build a Culture That Improves Productivity, Performance, and Profits. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Thursday, Friday, and Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.